You might have seen in the news recently various media outlets expressing outrage at Nigel Farage saying this.
I'm not against, opening up our hearts and taking some refugees, but goodness me, we have to vet incredibly carefully.
You've tweeted terrible news from Berlin, but no surprise. Events like these will be the Merkel legacy. Brendan Cox, the widower of Joe Cox, has tweeted, quotes, blaming politicians for the actions of extremists. That's a slippery slope, Nigel.
Yes, well, of course, he would know more about extremists than me, Mr. Cox. He backs organisations like Hope Not Hate, who masquerade as being lovely and peaceful, but actually pursue violent and very undemocratic means.
The media outrage seems to be centred around 2 points. First, that saying something negative about someone who's recently lost a loved one is bad, and the accuracy of calling Hope Not Hate extremist. So let's look at each in turn. Losing a loved one is definitely a horrific experience, and someone in such a position I think is deserving of sympathy. However, I don't think that losing a loved one absolves you of all criticism. Brendan Cox has not suddenly become a saint by virtue of his wife being tragically killed. Furthermore, Farage is responding to a statement made by Cox. This statement here is a comment that I disagree with. If Theresa May, for example, released all prisoners currently being held in UK prisons, and there was an increase in the level of crime, would it not be reasonable to hold her to account for that? Merkel has let in around 2 million unvetted migrants, despite ISIS saying that it would use the refugee crisis to help bring its soldiers into Europe. Now you can argue whether on balance you think Merkel's policy is still worth it or not, but it is pretty absurd to say that politicians should not be held to account for their policies. The second point of whether Hope Not Hate is an extremist organisation is more contentious. If you're not familiar with Hope Not Hate, it is an advocacy organisation that has the stated intention of defeating hate groups. It's campaigned a lot against the English Defence League, for example. So why would Farage think that they're extremist? I'll go through what information I'm aware of. Certainly I don't know anything about this group. Well, first up, Farage was assaulted by an alleged member of Hope Not Hate a few years back. The assailant has been identified as a member by some online blogs, but there's never been a full confirmation. Now, it might be a bit unfair to tar a whole organisation with the actions of a single person, especially as it's not been definitively proven that they are a member, but that is a pretty bad experience for Farage to have. You can kind of understand why he might hold some negative views about the organisation based on this. Secondly, a group of protesters chased Farage out of a pub where he was having lunch with his family and jumped on his car's bonnet as he drove away. This photo is allegedly taken from outside the pub and is Zita Holborn, someone who works closely with Hope Not Hate, and incidentally is also co-founder of United Black Labour for Jeremy Corbyn at present. Again, this might just be one person and may not be reflective of the core group, but harassing Farage whilst he's with his family is pretty horrible. Again, you can kind of see why he might have a negative view of the group. So what about people that are directly part of Hope Not Hate? Well, there's Jackie Walker. She's a researcher there. If you haven't heard of Jackie before, she's also a member of the far-left Momentum group. She made quite a few headlines this year for seemingly anti-Semitic statements, which included her saying that the Jews were the chief financiers of the slave trade, her criticising Holocaust Memorial Day and questioning the need for security in Jewish schools. She said that proportionately more gypsies were killed than Jews, and that perhaps Jews shouldn't use the word Holocaust. In case you're wondering, the first point there does not align to the historical consensus. She was subsequently suspended from the Labour Party. But does having a few bad members mean that the group overall is extreme? What about communications that must have gone through some kind of sign-off process? Well, this year, Hope Not Hate published a report claiming that there had been over 50,000 tweets celebrating the death of Joe Cox. This was then repeated by much of the mainstream media. The Economist found that Hope Not Hate had misrepresented the figures by over 3,000%. Despite admitting to the misrepresentation, the authors of the article continued to retweet the article, supporting false claims. Now, I don't know whether this was a genuine mistake and they carried on retweeting without corrections due to incompetence or something, or whether this was a conscious effort to mislead the public and use the tragic death of Joe Cox for political gain. If it was the latter, that's pretty bad. Hope Not Hate has also been criticised for targeting Muslim reformers, people that oppose Islamic extremism, and the group have also campaigned against UKIP in general. There are some photos online of UKIP posters that appear to have been vandalised by Hope Not Hate, although these pictures do not conclusively prove that the group did this. So in summary, allegedly it was a member of the group that assaulted Farage, allegedly another member was part of a group that went after his family, one of their researchers has made various anti-Semitic statements, the group produced misleading statistics to the public, they have targeted Muslim reformers and may be involved in other bust-ups. But does all of this make them extremist? Well, it's not a slam dunk. It will be very interesting if they get the court case they're seeking for. It will also be interesting to see whether they return the money to donors if they decide not to pursue legal action. What do you think? Have you had any interaction with this group?